Hello, everybody, and welcome to Open Door Encounters, the Men of Faith service. Today, I am interviewing Geoff Mumford, who is our local reverend of all the churches and brings us all together. So, hello, Geoff.
Hello, Lucy. Hello, everyone.
So my first question today is the same as all first questions for everybody in the Men of Faith series. Geoff, please tell us all about your journey to faith, where it all began, and the roller coaster ride that it always is.
All right. Well, I don't actually remember this, but I suppose it all began when I was baptised or christened at my local parish church in Manchester, except I wasn't actually baptised in my local parish church because the night before my baptism, the church burnt down.
Oh, God.
So they moved the baptism into the church hall, and I was baptised in the church hall, well, a long time ago. And but that is kind of as far back. So from that point, really, I would say my journey of faith began. However, for the first 18, 19 years, I thought being a Christian was simply about going to church and doing things in church, the right things, and trying to live a good life. And it wasn't actually, well, there was an incident that happened when I was 15, and that I was involved in a serious road traffic accident, and I ended up in hospital. I was, in fact, I was told afterwards that it was very touch or go whether I'd actually make it. And that was at the age of 15, and I wasn't driving, but sadly my mum was driving, and she was actually the cause of the accident. But it was in the days before we had seat belts in the backs of cars, so I was flung across the car because I was actually sleeping at the time, and ended up with a punctured lung, head injuries, and a fractured spine.
Wow.
So, and internal bleeding as well. So it was a fairly serious accident, and I ended up in hospital. Fortunately, the hospital that was nearest to where the accident took place was in Oswestry, which had a specialist spinal injury unit. So they were able to deal with my injury on site. However, I don't really have any problems with my back anymore. Occasionally I have some pain with it from the vertebrae that was fractured. But there isn't actually anything you can do about a broken back, except you just have to lie still and wait for it to heal. But actually it was when I obviously, just after the accident happened, I realized that I remember some strange things. And one was this sense of being in a very, very white room, and nothing else, absolutely nothing else, just lots of white, and I had a bright light, and I sensed something in like what people would describe as a kind of heaven experience. As I was lying, at some point in that time between the accident and actually coming round in the hospital, which was a few days afterwards. So I think at that time, I believe that God actually was doing something at that point, and you know, for whatever reason, He had a purpose for me to come through that accident. But the other fantastic side of that was not actually so much my experience of God, which was incredible, and it's hard to describe. I can't, and I'm struggling to describe it because it was just this sense of being in God's presence and lots of light and lots of white, and just a very strange experience. But we were actually a long way from home, because we're actually traveling back from our holiday, and we just happened to have this accident on the A5 near Oswestry. So, and obviously the car was a write-off, so there was no way my parents could drive home or anything like that. And my church rallied round, and they arranged cars. That somebody lent us a car, brought a car down to us, sorted out loads of stuff, was looking after everything, and it was just amazing what it was to be part of a church family at that time. And so that had a huge impact on me as well. But I would say that I went to church all the way through my years growing up. This is a particular church. There was lots of people my age, obviously not the age I am now, but the age I was. We had a fantastic youth group. We put on pantomimes. I remember going potholing. I remember going for weekends away. And it was just a brilliant group to be a part of. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I don't remember is ever talking about God. There was never any Christianity in it. It was great fun, and we had a great time, but I don't remember. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't mentioned, but I don't remember it being mentioned. So for me, growing up, Christianity was very much a social thing. It was something you did. Church was social, and you enjoyed the fellowship, the friendship, and just having a really good time. So that was what I did. And then, of course, I went off to university. And the first night I arrived at university, my parents dropped me off, and I happened to be stood reading a notice board. Claire and Alice would say that's all I ever do when I go somewhere new, read notice boards. But I was reading this notice board, and this girl called Natasha came up alongside me and also started to look at the notice board. We got talking, and she told me she was a Christian.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, she's a Christian, I'm a Christian, that's all right. She said, why don't you come along to a Christian Union event? Now, I knew nothing about any Christian organizations on campus, but she said, I've been invited to this by some of my fellow college students who are already at the university, and so why don't you come along? So we went along, and it was just good to be with some other people and get to know some people on that first night. And obviously they became my friendship group in those early weeks at university. But the interesting thing was, like me, they said they were Christians.
Yeah.
They had something which I didn't have. And that was a living relationship with Jesus.
Right.
And I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't know what they had, which I didn't. So it wasn't actually until the second term at university when one of them invited me to a mission which was taking place in the university. And I remember going to this meeting in Derwent College Hall. I was at York University here in York. And went to Derwent College Hall, and there was this big meeting. There was a speaker talking about Jesus. There was music. There was people giving testimonies, and that night I heard for the first time the gospel. Now, I'm not saying I didn't hear the gospel when I've been going to church. I suspect I did, but for the first time it actually clicked. I actually understood it, and I actually realized that the way to live life is in relationship with Jesus. And that night I made a commitment. So that's how I actually became a Christian. But that's only part of the story, because of course becoming a Christian is one thing, but actually living as a Christian is a very different thing. And in fact, it's very hard. And it can be very hard. And so although I made that commitment and everything changed for me at that point, including actually what I then began to want to do as a career, or where my life was taking me, because I'd started at university with this. Well, I'd gone through school thinking I would become a chemist, not a pharmacist, a chemist, research and development in laboratories and all of that. And I'd even done worked in the summer holidays prior to getting to university for a major chemical company in Manchester in their labs, and all that kind of thing. And so I thought that was where I was heading. I was going to, do really well and get a good job in chemistry and work my way up to earn lots of money. That was where that was where I was going. So but then God got hold of me and turned it all around.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I no longer had that drive to earn lots of money. Not that I wouldn't like to earn lots of money. I'm not saying that. But there was no longer that drive to have lots of money. There was no longer that desire. And God started to grow me as a Christian. I was growing in faith. I was, for the first time in my life, I was going to Bible studies, prayer meetings, all of this, all as part of the Christian Union at the university. And basically, I began to realize that God wanted me to do something for him in life, not to do chemistry. I mean, that happened over the course of the next year or so. So I basically, my life started to take a different direction. I carried on doing my chemistry degree. I didn't drop out. And I got a chemistry degree at the end of my 3 years. But it was no longer kind of the icing on the cake that I was aiming for. I was no longer interested in the same way about making a career out of chemistry. So that was the significance of that particular moment. It was kind of like God got hold of me and turned my life around and sent me off in a different direction.
Right.
Now that sounds like it's dead easy. You just follow what God wants you to do, and bingo, you get to where you want to go, or where he wants you to go. But I had lots of struggles. I had lots of challenges. It was not an easy road. It was not an easy journey. And, some of the things that I went through, had bereavement, I had family illness, I had, I had relationship difficulties, all that kind of thing. It was hard. It was not easy. But God was there with me through it all, and he got me through it, and continues to get me through it, because even now, even though I'm a vicar now, and I've got to look after churches and all of that kind of thing, I've not made it. I've not got to that point in my journey of faith where I'm kind of sorted.
Yeah.
I'm far from sorted. I've got a heck of a long way to go before that day when I will meet Jesus face to face in heaven.
Excellent. That's quite an interesting look at where it all began for you. So, Geoff, it'd be interesting to hear on your journey of faith how you turned from just being a normal Christian like all the rest of us and converted that into becoming a vicar.
Yeah, well, I have a vague memory of wanting to be a vicar when I was a very young boy. So, kind of 8, 9, perhaps a little older. And partly that was because of the vicar at my church at the time. And he went on to be the provost and then dean of Coventry Cathedral. He'd been the vicar of our parish. And I always kind of aspired in a way to be like him, because as a vicar, he came across very well. He did amazing things in the parish that we were in. I remember one year he had people from the church visiting every cathedral in the UK. Well, in England, in England. So that was one thing. He also organised a parish trip. One parish trip. He hired chartered a train from Manchester to London to go to Westminster Abbey.
Right.
But then on another occasion, he arranged a trip for about 40 people from the parish to the United States, and we all went on the plane together and spent 4 weeks with a parish in Connecticut in the US, and we visited a lot of the country as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he just really inspired me as a vicar. And then, of course, he left to become provost of Coventry Cathedral, and then I went off to university. And to be honest, I didn't think that much of it, although my mum remained in contact with him. And then by some chance, I ended up going to see him in Coventry to talk about ordination. I think I was already exploring it because I said I'd always when I was very young, my idea was to become a vicar because I thought that was a nice thing to do. But then my career path changed, and I was looking at, as I've already said, going into chemistry and being a research and development chemist. And so it was actually after I'd become a Christian at York University, I started to begin to think that maybe that was what God was calling me to do again. And so I began to explore it. And I actually, at one point, went to Bishop Thorpe Palace to meet with the then director of ordinands for the diocese. And I remember the chaplain from the university saying to me, "Oh, you will never make a vicar. Don't waste your time going to see this chaplain, the DDO, at Bishop Thorpe Palace." Mm-hmm. I did go, and that, I suppose, was the first proper conversation I had about it. And at that point, I decided myself that it wasn't the right time. So I actually ended up working, because I didn't want to go into chemistry at this stage. I'd kind of given that up as a bad job. I actually ended up working at the Spurriergate Centre in York, which is a 12th century church that had been converted into a cafe outreach centre. You probably know it.
I do.
Yeah. And I was there for about nearly 2 years working there. And then I had a conversation with somebody from St Michael of Elfrey Church, which was a church I was then attending. And we talked about what God might be calling me to do next. And I was encouraged to write to the Church Mission Society to find out if they had any opportunities to do administration. Right. Now, because I thought at that time one of my gifts was administration, I've since discovered it is definitely not one of my gifts. And you only need to look at my study to see that. So administration is off my gift list. But what happened in that journey was they actually wrote back to me and said, "Well, we have no jobs in administration. However, we'd like you to come and meet us because we think you might like to go and work in Egypt." And I thought, what? That was not on my list of to-dos. So I went down to London to see them, and I was told it was just an informal chat. And I actually had the most intense interview I think I've ever had in the offices of CMS in London. And I thought, oh, well, I don't think they'll want me after this interview, because I was not expecting it. And but however, after that, they got back to me and said, we'd like you to come down for 4 interviews with 4 different people in London. And I thought, interviews? If that was an informal chat, what on earth is an interview going to be like? And I went down, and they'd arranged 4 interviews in 4 different parts of London. So I had to travel around London to these different interviews to meet with people who were to assess my suitability for going to work for CMS in Egypt. At least that was what I thought at the time. But actually, as it was, the most of the interviewers said to me, "Well, what do you mean? Are you going to be selected? You're already going." And I thought, what? And it soon became apparent that this wasn't an interview about whether they were going to send me anywhere. This was actually an interview because they decided to send me somewhere. Or this was a chat because they decided to send me somewhere, and they were just trying to work out where was the best place. They'd originally said Egypt, and the idea of that was to go and work in the Egyptian Diocesan Publishing House in Cairo. And that sounded all right. It was an administrative type role. And then after that, they said, well, there is this opportunity in, I think, Uganda was one opportunity. There was somewhere else in another country somewhere, India, to go to work in a library in India for the church. So lots of things came out, but eventually they settled on the fact that I could go and work as an administrator for the Sudanese program, which was a church project run by the cathedral in Cairo, looking after Sudanese refugees who sadly found themselves destitute and poor living in Cairo. So that was actually what I went out to do. And I can remember ringing my mum up after all this had happened. I don't think I mentioned I was going for these interviews, and saying, "Oh, Mum, I'm going to Egypt." And there was one of those deathly silences on the other end of the phone. But I did go, and I arrived at the airport in Cairo quite, not frightened, but quite nervous, I suppose, to be met by the dean of the cathedral in Cairo. And he said to me, "Right, well, you were coming out to be the administrator for this project, but the manager's actually given up and gone home back to England. So I'm going to make you the manager of this project."
Oh no.
So I ended up running this project for the cathedral in Cairo.
Wow.
And I loved it. I really enjoyed it, and I loved living in Egypt. It was a great place to be. I can't say I ever felt homesick at all. I just kind of immersed myself in the life of the community in Cairo. But the interesting thing was that I never felt confident enough to stand up and speak in front of people. That was always what had put me off any form of ordination, because that's what I saw ordination being about, standing up in front of people and talking. And I'd started there was lots of days when they had services in Cairo, and on the Friday morning I'd met some other young English people who were going to another church in Cairo. So I thought, well, I'll skip the service at the cathedral and head to this church to be with them. And the dean found out I'd been doing this, and he called me into his study and said to me, "Now, you're here on behalf of the Church Mission Society. Therefore, you have to worship here at the cathedral. So you will no longer go to this other church, because you will be here on a Friday morning. And to make sure you are, I'm going to make you a reader in training," which basically meant he was going to have me lead services, preach, and do other things in services without any training. Well, not any real training. but basically to keep me at the cathedral. So I ended up doing the first sermon I ever preached was in the cathedral at Cairo.
Wow.
That was the first ever sermon I preached. And but he did me a favor, because although that wasn't what I wanted to do, he actually, I suppose he forced me to do it in a way, but I ended up doing it and found that actually it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. It's still quite hard work, quite a challenge for someone like me who's quite introvert, but I ended up doing that. And then to top it all, he had to go home for an operation in the summer because he was from Australia, and normally a locum priest would come out from Australia to cover for him. And on Christmas Day, he called me into his study and said, you know, I'm going back home today for this operation. Unfortunately, there's nobody else come out to cover for me, so I'm going to put you in charge of all the English-speaking services. And you just have to make sure they happen. Obviously, I couldn't do communion, but to make all these things happen. So so that's what I did for the next 3 months from Christmas Day.
Wow.
And I just felt like it was what I was meant to be doing. It just fitted so well, and you know, and I believe that was God showing me that all these things which I said I couldn't do, actually I could, because it wasn't me doing them, it was God doing them through me. So after that, I had conversations with the dean about going back to when I went back to England to explore ordination again, which is what I did. So I returned from Egypt, and I ended up actually being best man for Gary. Well, Gary and Natasha. And you remember Natasha was the first person I met at university, the one who invited me to go along to that meeting that night, which was the beginning of the transformation in my life. So I was best man at Gary's wedding, and after Gary's wedding, well, Gary and Natasha's wedding, I was at the bar having a pint. You'd never guess that that would be the kind of thing I'd do, but I was having a pint and got chatting to this bloke with a ponytail, an older bloke than me, but with a ponytail. And he got talking to me and he said, "Oh, I'm a vicar from Birmingham, and I'm looking for someone to come and help run a community centre we've just built on the church. Would you be interested?" And so the next thing I knew, I was going to move into Birmingham, and ended up living on this outer city estate by the airport for 2 years, working for this church and running their community centre. And during that time was when I started to explore ordination with Birmingham Diocese, which of course was the diocese I was then in. And eventually I came to the point where I was selected for ordination and to go for training. And I then moved to Nottingham, where I studied for 3 years. So that, and then at the end of that, I was ordained. So that's basically how I ended up getting ordained. And actually, looking back on it, I would say it was a journey of basically God showing me that all the things that I never wanted to do or didn't think I could do, with Him, anything was possible. Yeah. And He took me through those hurdles that I had to get over. God didn't need me to get over them because He knew I could get over them. But that was basically where we were at. So, yeah. So that's how I ended up getting ordained.
Definitely.
I realised it wasn't for me, but God realised it was. So, and God always gets His way.
So we're into December now, and I've got my Christmas lights up and the messy church bags and all the bits and bobs. and this will be our last Men of Faith interview before Christmas. So I'd like to ask you what Christmas Day looks like this year in the Mumford household, and how that kind of differs this year maybe from other years. What do the Mumfords get up to on Christmas Day?
Well, to be honest, the one thing that I've really missed since Alice arrived anyway, is that I'm never around to see her open a Christmas present, sorry, not birthday presents, a Christmas present on Christmas Day. Because I'm up early, I'm off out, and when I get home, although Claire and Alice come to church on Christmas Day, and I'll see them later in the morning, Alice can't wait to open a present. And usually I have to be out to do a service in one of my churches at 9 o'clock, and therefore I'm off out about 8:15, and before Alice is even out of bed. And then when we get back from church, that's when I open my presents, and but Alice has already opened all hers, so I miss all that, and I've missed that every year since she was born, because every Christmas I'm working. I'm having to do stuff on Christmas Day now. Fortunately, I've never been in a church where they have afternoon and evening services on Christmas Day, so I do get to finish after lunch, before lunch on Christmas Day. And in our early years as a family, we often used to go to Claire's parents when I got in from church, when church was over, and that was how we'd spend Christmas Day, and possibly stay over for Boxing Day, etc. But for the last few years, we've ended up just the three of us in the vicarage. And to be honest, what do I do in the afternoon? I go to sleep. Because I've been up. Christmas Eve can often be, I kind of leave the vicarage at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I don't get back until after midnight communion.
Yeah.
So Christmas Eve is absolutely exhausting day. And then, of course, I'm up early again the following morning. So most Christmas afternoons I've fallen asleep. I think the wine and the drinks don't help, but
dinner
don't help to keep me awake.
Have Christmas dinner.
Yes, we generally have a Christmas dinner, although it tends to be more late afternoon dinner. But and we do what every other family, I guess, would do on Christmas Day. We sit around talking, drinking, watching the Queen's speech, possibly, and watching some telly. So not a particularly exciting Christmas Day, because, to be honest, I'm exhausted. Now this year, what COVID has done is meant that I'm only going to be doing one service on Christmas Day. And I've got another vicar taking the midnight service on Christmas Eve. So
easy Christmas for you this year then, Geoff.
Well, yes, so it would seem. I'm sure it won't be, but yes, it's looking that way at the moment. Anyway, I've given all my secrets away now.
You're still allowed to have a nap on Christmas Day afternoon, though.
Yeah, of course.
Easier.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads on to my third and final question, which is, where do you think that the church and the origins of Christianity fit into the modern day Christmas?
Well, to be honest, Christmas isn't Christmas without Jesus. And so whilst people talk about Christmas, well, I mean, that's one of the things this year, isn't it? People have said, oh, Christmas is cancelled, we're not going to have Christmas. But Christmas is never going to be cancelled, because Christmas is a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. And, a bit like our birthdays are not cancelled, even if we don't actually celebrate them.
Mm-hmm.
They're still there. You still have your birthday, and Christmas will still be here, and is still here, regardless of whether we actually celebrate in quite the same way. And I think when people say Christmas is cancelled, What they mean is they won't be able to go out and do all the things that they perhaps would have done previous Christmases. And I suspect in the main, that's going out to pubs and restaurants and drinking a lot and eating a lot.
Yeah.
And it won't be Christmas won't be the same this year, because there will be restrictions in place. And yes, family is so important at Christmas. People get together as families, and we might not be able to do that this year, but Christmas is definitely not cancelled.
No.
Because Christmas isn't something that only happens because we have parties and have a lot to drink and that kind of thing. Because Christmas is a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ, and without Jesus Christ coming into our lives, we don't have hope.
No.
When Jesus died on that cross, he gave us hope of eternal life, and we have a choice. Every one of us has a choice as to whether to accept that and take hold of it, like I did that night at that Christian Union mission back in 1990. I'm giving my age away now. But like I did that night, it's that choice that we need to make, that everybody needs to make at some point. And we can choose to say, no, I'm not interested. I don't want anything to do with God and Jesus and Christianity. Or we can choose to embrace it and take hold of it and invite him into our lives and have a relationship with Jesus.
Mm.
So that, for me, is the center of Christmas, the whole point of it. So it just gets so diluted by all the media hype, the kind of Christmas partying and everything, the whole idea that Christmas could be cancelled, because you can't cancel Christmas.
No.
And that for me is what Christmas is about. It's about celebrating that opportunity for that relationship with Jesus. And
yeah. You can't cancel your birthday regardless of how old.
No, you still get a year older. I did think about it for my birthday this year because of its significance, but you can't. Life goes on, time goes on, and these events come round. And it's an anniversary, isn't it? It's the anniversary of Jesus' birth. It's a birthday, his birthday. And we should all sing Happy Birthday, Dear Jesus on Christmas Day.
Sure. Do you sing that on Christmas Day?
We've sung it in church on Christmas Day.
Good.
Yeah.
So the changes over time of Christmas, what do you think Christmas holds in the future in terms of Christianity and the church?
Well, I think we'll get back to the basics of what it's about. I think we need to focus more on the actual meaning of Christmas, on the birth of Jesus Christ, and focus on that. Society will do what society does, and society will continue. I mean, if we can't do Christmas as we know it this year, next year it's going to be an even bigger party, isn't it?
Probably.
But you've just got to, the church has just got to continue to focus on the birth of Jesus. Because without Jesus, there would be no church. Jesus brought, although he didn't form a church as such, he formed the first Christian community, which led to the formation of the church. And the church is basically a group of people who get together and celebrate what Jesus has done for us on the cross. And without Jesus' birth, of course, he couldn't have died. And of course, after Christmas is, I think, the second greatest feast of the year, second greatest festival of the year after Easter. Because Easter is the time we celebrate his resurrection. After he'd been crucified, after he'd died that horrible death on the cross, he actually rose again 3 days later from the dead. He defeated death. He showed the world that death could not hold him. And when we've made a commitment to follow him, we take hold of that for ourselves, and that's why we receive eternal life. So we can grab hold of eternal life. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't end up dying in this life, because our bodies just don't last.
Mm-hmm.
But when we die in this life as Christians, we are resurrected in a new body with Jesus forever.